Long before my family ever moved to the countryside, winter used to mean something soft. Snowball fights, gingerbread cookies, my sister Ava teasing me for being afraid of spiders. I used to think the cold carried a kind of magic, something harmless, something bright. But when Ava disappeared, winter became the season I hated most. Every December crept in like a reminder of what we lost, settling into our house in ways we couldn't shake. For months after she vanished, the police searched the woods, the frozen ponds, the old railway tunnel on the edge of town. They found nothing. We tried to live in the same house afterward, but grief made our rooms feel swollen with silence. And every time I passed by Ava's door, I'd swear I heard her humming. My parents started fighting more, and eventually they decided moving somewhere quieter would help all of us heal, or at least start pretending we were healing. So we bought an old brick house out in the countryside. It was tall and narrow, with ivy crawling over the walls and a wide wraparound porch. The real estate agent kept calling it full of character, which is what people say when something is too old to describe politely. When she handed us the keys, she smiled too much and joked that some locals claimed the attic was busy, like she wanted to see if the word would make us laugh. It didn't. At first, nothing happened. The house creaked the way old houses do, and the pipes shuddered every time someone ran hot water. But on our third night, something changed. I was in my room with the lights off, scrolling through old photos of Ava, ones where she still had that ridiculous dimpled smile, when I heard it for the first time. Footsteps. Not downstairs, not outside. Above me, in the attic. At first, I thought maybe it was an animal, something small nesting in the insulation. But the steps were wrong. Slow, heavy, measured. And they came at the same exact time, 11:19 p.m., every night. I told my parents about it, but they brushed it off, saying the house was adjusting to the winter chill. But wood doesn't pace, and mice don't drag their feet. On January 9th, the wind blew so hard the windows shook in their frames. I stayed up late again, flipping through pictures until I reached the last photo ever taken of Ava. She was standing in front of that abandoned railway tunnel, smiling, bundled in a red coat. But just behind her shoulder was a shadow, something tall. I'd always told myself it was a trick of the light. At exactly 11:19 p.m., the footsteps started again. Soft at first, then heavier. My throat tightened. I grabbed my camera, not because I thought a picture would help, but because fear makes you do strange things, and stepped into the hallway. The air was colder outside my room, cold enough that I could see the fog of my breath rise. Moonlight from the hallway window stretched thin across the floor. I crept toward the attic door, every nerve in my body buzzing. Then the footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then 3 slow knocks thudded from the other side of the attic door. Tug! 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 My stomach dropped. My hand shook around the camera. I lifted it and snapped a picture. The flash burst white and harsh, lighting the hallway for half a second. And in that half second, a fresh handprint appeared on the attic door, wet, as if pressed by a hand covered in melting snow. I stumbled back, my breath short. And then I heard it. "Ollie?" Ava's voice. I froze. My whole body felt pinned in place. "Ava?" My voice cracked. "Ava, are you up there?" Something shifted behind the attic door. The sound was soft, like fabric brushing wood. "It's cold," the voice whispered. "Let me out." Tears stung my eyes before I even realized I was crying. I reached toward the doorknob, every part of me wanting it to be her, wanting something, anything, to give me hope that she wasn't gone forever. But then I saw the handprint clearly under the moonlight. The fingers weren't right. Too long, curled, uneven, like bones bent the wrong way. I stepped back. The voice came again, but something in it had changed, deeper, strained, like someone forcing themselves to sound human and not quite managing. "Let me out," I ran. My footsteps pounded down the hallway as I slammed my bedroom door shut. My hands shook so violently, I almost dropped the lock. I sat against the door, breathing in sharp, panicked bursts. And then I heard footsteps again, but not above me. In the hallway, just outside my door, slow, dragging footsteps. Something scraped against the wood floor, like nails. Then a whisper came right through the crack under the door. "She's still out there, Oliver, but I'm here now." The doorknob twitched. Metal clicked softly as something tested the lock. Then everything went still. At some point, exhaustion dragged me into sleep, curled against the door like a guard dog who was too scared to bark. In the morning, sunlight stretched across the floor as if the night had been nothing but a bad dream. But the camera was still in my hand, and when my parents saw me asleep at the door, they scolded me for staying up so late. They didn't want to hear about footsteps or whispers or handprints. Maybe they couldn't handle hearing it. But they did develop the photo, and when they called me downstairs, both of their faces were pale. The picture showed the attic door, and something standing just behind it, tall, thin, fingers curled around the edge of the door frame, a smile too wide, too sharp, stretching across a face that didn't look entirely human. My parents asked if I'd edited it somehow. I hadn't. We argued about it for days, and they replaced the attic door a week later, painted the frame, cleaned the walls, did everything they could to erase the memory of that night. But the footsteps never stopped. Every winter night at 11:19 p.m., they returned, soft at first, then heavier. Sometimes they paced, sometimes they knocked, and sometimes I felt the floorboards tremble slightly, as if someone, or something, was leaning its full weight against the door, listening. The worst part wasn't the footsteps. It was the voice. Because some nights, when I lie awake and the cold creeps up my walls like fingers climbing a ladder, I hear it whisper again. Not the distorted one. The other one. The one that sounds like Ava. Sometimes she says my name. Sometimes she asks why I won't open the door. Sometimes she says she's lonely. And every time, a part of me breaks a little more. I don't know what waits behind that attic door now. I don't know if it ever had anything to do with Ava, or if it just learned her voice the way wild things learn the cries of animals they hunt. But I do know this. Whatever stands behind that door remembers me, and it waits. Every night. At 11:19, just in case I finally decide to open it. If I ever do, I don't think the person who walks away will still be me. Grief can play tricks on the mind, but danger grows when we let sorrow blind us to what reality is trying to warn us about. No matter how much we miss someone, we can't chase echoes in the dark hoping they'll lead us back, because sometimes the things that answer aren't the ones we lost. I've spent years trying to convince myself that fear fades with time, but the truth is, it just changes shape. When I was 17, someone broke into my family's home while we slept. They didn't take anything. They just stood at the foot of my bed and watched. After that, darkness wasn't just darkness anymore. It was possibility. It was danger. So by 19, I moved to Anchorage for college and to get away from reminders of that night. Babysitting seemed like the perfect job. Quiet houses, kids asleep, nothing unpredictable. When I met the Adler family, it felt like exactly the kind of normal I wanted. Megan Adler was a single mom working nights at a ski lodge. Her sons were sweet kids. Lucas, 9, talked nonstop about stars and planets. Eli, 6, was shy and clung to me every time his mom left. He was the kind of kid who stared into corners too long, like he was waiting for something to move. Megan assured me he just had an active imagination. Their house sat surrounded by tall spruce trees that seemed to lean in on stormy nights. The back hallway was always cold, even with the heat on. I told myself it was insulation. Everyone has their quirks, including houses. For months, nothing seriously bothered me. I settled into a routine, help with homework, snacks, bedtime stories. But sometimes, When the power flickered or the wind howled, I'd catch Eli staring down that dark hall, whispering something like he was talking to someone I couldn't see. One night, during a brutal winter storm, Megan's shift started early. Power was out in half the neighborhood, and my phone couldn't hold a signal. She rushed through the snow and thanked me for coming before disappearing into the night. The boys were restless. Lucas kept setting up his small telescope by the window, hoping to see a comet he'd heard about in school. Eli sat pressed against me, watching the hallway. "Is he gone tonight?" he whispered. "Who?" I asked. "The man in the hallway," he murmured. My heart tightened. "There's no man here. He watches, but only when the lights go off." I tried to smile like it was a game, but my skin crawled. About an hour later, I heard 3 distinct knocks, soft, but from inside the house. I froze. Lucas did too. "He's back," he whispered. I tried to explain it away. "Maybe it's just the storm." "No, it's always 3, he said quietly. "Every night this week." My stomach dropped. I kept the boys close after that. The storm shook the windows. The power flickered again, and Eli started crying softly. I offered to put him to bed early, hoping sleep would help. He agreed only if his closet stayed open. I didn't understand it, but I honored it. While I got Lucas some blankets, the wind briefly died, and that silence felt wrong, like the world was waiting. Suddenly, Lucas pointed toward the hallway. "Nora, look!" Wet footprints led from the back door, across the floor, toward the bedrooms, small enough to be a child's, bare. I knew I had locked that door the moment I arrived. Every hair on my body stood up. I gathered the boys back into the living room. My hands trembled so hard I could barely dial, and my phone kept cutting out. When I finally reached Megan, she sounded terrified. "Nora, is it him?" she asked. "Him who?" "My ex. He broke into the garage last year. He's unpredictable." "No," I said quickly. "These prints are too small." I remembered the smudges I'd seen on the hallway walls, high up, like someone tall was touching them, stretching, reaching. Megan told me to check the back corridor. "The police will take a while in this weather," she said. "Just make sure he's not inside." My body went cold. I don't think this is something I know how to check for. But the boys were watching me with wide, terrified eyes, and I couldn't show fear. I walked toward the corridor with Lucas's red astronomy flashlight, its dim glow making everything look worse. My breath misted in the cold. The attic hatch above me hung slightly open, dust falling in a neat sprinkling below it. Someone, or something, had come down. Then a thud sounded above me, followed by movement. Fast, scraping. That was enough. I yelled for the boys, grabbed jackets, and shoved them out the front door. We sprinted into the snow, slipping and stumbling. Behind us, a door slammed so hard the house shook. We reached a neighbor's porch, pounding and shouting until they let us in. I hugged the boys close, shivering even in the warmth of their entryway. The police arrived after what felt like an eternity. They found the footprints. They found the disturbed attic dust, but no intruder, no man, not even signs of forced entry, just evidence of someone quietly living there. Megan arrived and scooped up the boys. She cried into their hair, apologizing over and over. She admitted Eli had been talking about the hallway man for weeks, but she thought they were nightmares. Police asked me questions, whether I was stressed, whether fear could have made me misinterpret things. "My fear doesn't create footprints," I said. They had no answer. Megan thanked me, but she couldn't bring herself to meet my eyes. I think part of her wished the whole thing could be dismissed as imagination. The next day, she changed locks, installed cameras, pulled the attic ladder down permanently, and she never called me again. I didn't blame her. I tried moving on, switched apartments, took fewer night classes, convinced myself that what happened was a freak incident. "Anchorage storms can mess with your mind," I said. "Houses make strange noises," I said. "Kids see things adults can't." Months later, the next winter storm hit. My safer building, my secure locks, none of that stopped the old fear when the lights flickered. I lay in bed, reminding myself I was alone and okay. Then, tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks. The exact rhythm, the exact softness, right outside my bedroom wall. I sat up slowly. It was freezing in my apartment despite the heater running full blast. I told myself it was the wind or a pipe or anything that made sense. Tap, tap, tap. Closer, like someone waiting for me to answer. I held my breath so long my chest hurt. The knocking stopped. Morning came like nothing had happened. No footprints, no open doors, no dust fallen from above. Just fear, too familiar to ignore. Whatever had lived in that attic, whether human or not, it wasn't finished with me. Or maybe fear itself had learned my name. Maybe once you're marked by something watching in the dark, it never really leaves. Sometimes I lie awake and think of Eli staring at shadows, whispering warnings that none of us wanted to hear. Kids aren't dumb. They notice what adults refuse to believe. Some things don't need doors or windows to get in. Some things live in the cold spaces we pretend aren't there. Sometimes, at night, I catch myself staring at the corners too long, waiting for something to move. I wish I could say that night on Alder Ridge Lane was the end. But every winter, when storms hit and the lights flicker, I still hear those knocks. Perfectly spaced, perfectly patient. Fear, like a visitor, reminding me it remembers where I live. Always trust your instincts. When children are afraid, don't dismiss what they see. Safety isn't only about locks and alarms. It's about listening when something inside you screams that danger is already in the house. I never liked winter. People call it peaceful, but to me the cold makes everything feel abandoned, like the world stops paying attention. When you grow up in foster homes, you learn to expect danger in silence. The worst nights I remember weren't loud. They were the quiet ones, when nobody bothered to check if you were okay. My name is Mason Hale. I'm 19. I work as a mechanic's apprentice in a small Maine town, trying to figure out life one paycheck at a time. My girlfriend, Chloe, is the best thing I've ever had, even if her home life is garbage. Her stepdad picks fights just to feel big. Tonight he yelled at her over nothing, called her ungrateful, slammed a door. When she texted me to come get her, I didn't think twice. We drove without a plan, just wanting distance. My truck isn't much more than rust held together by hope. And the heater gave up after a few miles. I kept telling myself the night air would calm us down. And it did, at first. Then Chloe suggested Lake Harrow. Said she skated there when she was little. I almost told her we should go anywhere else, but I swallowed the fear. I didn't want to look weak. I didn't want to explain that the last time I stepped on that ice, a boy drowned. A boy I was too afraid to save. We left the streetlights behind. The radio only played static that sounded like humming. I tried to blame the old wiring. I tried to convince myself the past couldn't chase me forever. The lake was nothing like Chloe remembered. No lights, no benches, just a flat sheet of ice, surrounded by pines that looked more like silhouettes than trees. The air smelled like wet metal. That smell dragged 12-year-old me right back to the night Sammy disappeared. But Chloe breathed in the cold like it was freedom. So, I pretended to be fine. We stepped out. Our boots vanished into deep snow. The ice ahead was dark beneath the moon, cloudy like frozen smoke. Chloe walked a few yards toward it and stopped. "Mason, do you hear that?" I listened. At first, it sounded like the wind under the ice. Then I realized it was voices, not talking, humming. Slow, repeating, human. My chest tightened. "We should go," I said. "What if someone needs help?" she asked. Her voice was trying to stay brave. "No, Chloe, please, get back in the truck." But she kept staring at the lake like she could see something I couldn't. Then the humming stopped. Silence hit so fast it felt wrong. A scream burst up from beneath the ice, like someone drowning right below our feet. I ran toward Chloe without thinking. The snow slid out from under me near the frozen edge. Something shifted under the ice directly below me, pushing upward. "Mason!" Chloe's shout cracked, terrified. I should have run. Instead, I took out my phone and snapped a picture with the flash. The ice glowed white-blue for an instant, and a face stared up at me. Skin blue, eyes wide open, mouth stretched in a scream that had nowhere to go. Sammy. Behind him, shadows shaped like people. Dozens, standing still in the dark water below. I stumbled backward, scrambling in the snow, and sprinted for the truck. Chloe was already yanking the passenger door open. I turned the key once, twice. The engine coughed like it was suffocating. On the third try, it roared alive. In the mirror, the surface of the lake rippled even though the night was dead calm. We didn't speak the whole drive back. The heater finally kicked in, but I couldn't stop shaking. When we got to her room, we sat on the floor, backs against the bed frame. My hands wouldn't unclench from around the phone. "Show me," she said softly. So I did. Her breath caught sharp in her throat. That's a person." "That's Sammy," I whispered. Saying his name felt like breaking a rule. She tried to rationalize it, a trick of the light, a reflection, ice distortions. But we both knew better. "I'm so sorry," she said finally, voice cracking. I locked the photo away in a hidden album. Couldn't look at it anymore. Couldn't delete it either. That night, I dreamed I was back on the ice as a kid, holding my hand out to Sammy while he screamed. This time, instead of slipping away, he grabbed my wrist. His grip was freezing. When I woke, I could still feel fingers around my arm. Days passed. Chloe avoided talking about that night. I pretended I was fine. But when the weather got colder, the nightmares came back. Sammy wasn't screaming anymore. He was humming. One evening after the shop closed, I found myself driving the old way home. The route past the turnoff to Lake Harrow. I kept my eyes straight, hands tight on the wheel. But that humming started in the dashboard static again. Faint, but real enough to make me pull over. "Not again," I muttered. I turned off the radio. The humming kept going. It wasn't coming from the truck. It was coming from outside, from the direction of the lake. A shape stood on the snow-covered road behind me, far back but still visible in the headlights. Too still to be a person out for a walk. Its head tilted like it recognized me. I hit the gas and didn't stop till I was home. I tried to ignore everything. Work, sleep, repeat. But the lake didn't want to be forgotten. One night, Chloe showed up on my porch, shivering under her hoodie. "I can't sleep," she said. "I keep thinking he's still down there, waiting." I tried to comfort her, but part of me agreed. The lake didn't scream for no reason. Those voices weren't echoes. Those people weren't reflections. "We can't go back there," I told her. "But what if someone is stuck?" she insisted. "What if more people went missing and nobody ever looked?" I wanted to protect her, but I also wanted answers. The guilt of running away again ate at me. We returned, just long enough to prove the lake was empty. That was the lie I told myself. Snow crunched under the tires as we pulled up. The lake was darker than before, like the ice had thickened into a solid wall of night. Chloe grabbed my hand. I didn't deserve her bravery. We only made it a few steps toward the shore before we heard it, humming. But this time, it wasn't coming from below. It was coming from the trees behind us. We spun around, nothing there. Then footsteps on the ice, slow, deliberate. We turned back. A figure stood on the frozen surface, just far enough that we couldn't see its face. Its clothes looked wrong, old, heavy, like they'd been underwater. It started walking toward us, each step silent but somehow echoing inside my chest. "Run," I said. Chloe didn't argue. We sprinted to the truck. I fumbled the keys but got the engine started fast. The figure was still watching us as we drove away, humming growing louder every second until suddenly, it stopped. Just like before, like it only needed us to hear it. We stayed away after that. We promised each other, no lake, no photos, no more searching for reasons. Some things aren't puzzles, some things are warnings, but winter doesn't take promises. When the temperature dropped low enough for the lakes to freeze again, I woke in the middle of the night. My phone screen was lit. The locked folder was open. The photo of Sammy had changed. Instead of pressed against the ice, he was closer. His hand was reaching toward the camera. His mouth wasn't screaming anymore. He was humming. I dropped the phone. My breath fogged the air like I was standing outside again. For a second, I swore I smelled that same metallic rot from the lake. I grabbed my coat and drove to Chloe's house. When she opened the door, I didn't have to explain. Her eyes told me she'd heard it too. We sat on her bed with the lights on, waiting for sunrise like kids hiding from monsters. Maybe that's exactly what we were. I don't know what the lake wants from us. Forgiveness? Company? A witness? I just know I'm not going back. But some nights, when everything is too quiet and the cold sinks into the walls, I feel like the lake is closer than it should be, like winter can follow you anywhere. And beneath the silence, I hear that same slow rhythm, calling my name. Trust your instincts. The past we try to bury can rise again, especially when it has something left to take. I didn't end up in Ashwick because I wanted a fresh start. I ended up there because every other road had already closed. Before the breakup, before the move, I thought my life in London was fine. Not extraordinary, but steady. My fiancée didn't agree. She said I lacked ambition, said she felt like she was dragging me through life. When she left, I let her go without a fight. I don't know if that made me weak or honest, but either way, it ended with me alone, jobless, and drifting. Ashwick was the kind of town people forget exists. Cold, gray, half abandoned. I took a night security job at an old train yard converted into a depot. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid rent on a small flat above a closed bakery. Nights were slow, quiet, and empty. My only company was my father's old cassette player. Classic rock was the one thing that still made me feel human. For months, the routine was simple. Check cameras, walk the perimeter, listen to the wind scrape through rusted tracks stretching into darkness. Most nights I convinced myself this life was enough, safe, in its own bleak way. Then the night came when everything shifted. At 1:19 a.m. on December 12th, a radio crackled beside me. No one else was on duty. No one else even had access to the channel. He's coming for the one who hid. I froze, tried to talk back. Static swallowed my voice, then clearer. Car 47, check, now. Car 47 was the oldest cargo wagon on the property, unused, sealed, and avoided. The story around it was simple. Years ago, a worker entered and never came out. People joked it was haunted, but I never believed in anything beyond bad luck and bad timing. Still, a security alert meant I had to check it. I stepped out into a brutal winter night. Snowflakes slapped sideways in the wind. Lamps flickered like candles ready to go out. My flashlight kept dimming as I walked, breath stinging in the cold. When I reached car 47, my gut tightened. The heavy lock hung open. I knew it had been sealed earlier. I remembered testing it. Fresh footprints marked the snow beneath the door. Someone was inside. I radioed dispatch. Nothing, not even static. As I lowered the device, a voice whispered through, soft and familiar. "Lucas, why did you leave me?" Her voice, my ex-fiancée. The tone, the trembling edge. I felt my chest cave in. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to sound stronger than I felt. The radio hissed, then, "You left me alone in the cold." My mind scrambled between fear and memory. Someone had to be messing with me. She was nowhere near Ashwick. She had a new life, far from anything involving abandoned trains and snowfall. But the voice had been perfect. I opened the wagon door anyway, mostly to prove to myself that she couldn't possibly be there. The inside was dark, metallic, bitterly cold. My flashlight cast shaky beams across rusted panels and warped crates. Then the door slammed shut behind me, a sharp, echoing clang that rattled my bones. I lunged for the door, locked from the outside. Then the breathing started, slow raspy, close. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. No answer, just that breathing inching nearer. I felt, more than heard, someone step behind me. "You shouldn't have run from me!" I swung the flashlight around wildly. Nothing but shadows. Panic surged. I turned toward the small window near the back of the wagon and smashed it with the metal flashlight. Shards sliced my arm as I climbed through onto the snow. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just ran. Boots slipping on frozen tracks. Lungs burning. Behind me, something clambered out of the wagon. Barefoot, slow, dragging one foot like it hurt to walk. I sprinted to the control room, burst inside, locked everything, and shoved a filing cabinet against the door. My whole body shook as I stared at the security monitors. Camera 1, empty. Camera 2, snow blowing in the wind. Camera 7, facing car 47, showed the wagon, completely undisturbed. No footprints, no broken window, no open lock. Like nothing had happened. Then camera 3 flickered. Through the static, a pale figure stood beside the control room, head tilted like it was listening for something. My blood ran cold. As soon as I leaned closer, the monitor cut to black. A knock hit the door. One sharp, deliberate knock. I raised the flashlight in both hands, breath shaking. "Lucas, let me in," the voice whispered through the metal. Her voice again. I backed away, shaking so hard the flashlight beam jerked across the walls. I didn't respond, didn't move. After a moment, footsteps padded away through the snow. When dawn broke, backup finally arrived. Patrol cars, my supervisor, a search team. I told them everything, showed them the cut on my arm, showed them the camera footage. But the wagon window wasn't broken. The lock wasn't open. There were no footprints anywhere. The camera files showed me running from nothing but empty snow. A few officers exchanged looks. One told me night shifts can play tricks on a tired mind. My supervisor suggested a day or two off. I lied and said I didn't need it. The truth was more complicated. If I quit, I'd have to go home, to the city where I'd lost everything. To memories I'd rather freeze than thaw. So I doubled down instead. Added new locks, brought a crowbar, made my coffee so strong it felt like a punch in the throat. But the nights didn't go quiet again. A few days later, the footsteps started, always along the tracks, always pacing, sometimes running, sometimes stopping right outside the control room door. I'd grip the crowbar and whisper, "You're not real." But the wind would carry her voice back to me. "Don't leave me." The worst part wasn't believing she was there. The worst part was fearing she wasn't, that it was all coming from inside me. On December 23rd, the storm knocked out half the yard's lamps. Darkness stretched across the tracks like an ocean. Inside the control room, the monitors flickered. Camera 7 lit up again. Car 47 looked different. Numbers scraped away. A figure stepped into view, barefoot, trembling, too pale to be alive. I whispered, "Please don't." The figure raised its face toward the camera. Her face, but hollow. Eyes like dark water, mouth cracked from cold. She lifted a hand and pointed directly at me. The feed cut to black. A tap hit the window of the control room. My breath fogged the glass as I turned. For a fraction of a second, her reflection stood behind mine, inside the room. I spun with the crowbar, expecting someone to be there. Nothing. Just the hum of the monitor. Just the empty room. Just my pulse pounding in my ears. I leaned heavily against the desk. Snow beat against the window like 1,000 fingers. I knew the truth then, even if I didn't want it. Nothing supernatural was hunting me. No ghost crawled from the wagon. No lost lover had returned in the snow. What chased me was guilt. What whispered was memory. What stood in the corner was everything I'd tried to bury. Failure, heartbreak, loneliness, shame. I wasn't running from her. I was running from myself. But some nights, when the wind hits the tracks just right, I still hear footsteps pacing through the yard, and in the white noise of snowfall, Her voice slips through the static of memory. "Lucas!" Calling for the one who hid. Sometimes, I answer, you can escape a place, a person, even a life, but not the truth inside yourself. Until you face your own guilt and regret, your past will always find a way to follow you into the dark. I never expected to move back into the cabin in Anchorage. It wasn't a place filled with warm childhood memories. It was more like a place you inherited because no one else wanted it. After my mom passed, the cabin became my responsibility. I told myself returning would save money and help me start fresh. But the truth was simpler. Grief had knocked the wind out of me, and the cabin was the only place I could afford to land. Winters here are long and merciless. Darkness hits early, air freezes inside your lungs, and the silence around the lake feels too heavy. My fiancé, Eric, could only stay on weekends because of his job. I pretended it didn't bother me. Pretended the empty nights didn't chip away at me. Pretended the shadows didn't seem to shift whenever I walked past an uncovered window. The cabin's history didn't help. Years ago, someone smashed a window in the middle of the night, a single shatter that woke my parents and sent all of us running around with flashlights, thinking we'd find someone lurking outside. But whoever did it vanished into the woods before we even flicked the lights on. That was when paranoia took root in me. Ever since, I've always felt like the darkness outside the cabin held its breath whenever I passed by. The night everything happened started quietly. I'd just returned from my shift at the diner, the kind of slow, cold night where customers hardly spoke and the wind howled against the windows. I grabbed firewood from the shed, hugging it to my chest as snow bit at my face. That's when I noticed the truck. A pickup sat near the tree line facing the cabin, blanketed with snow, windows frosted over, headlights off, engine running. A low rumble pulsed through the cold air. I couldn't see anyone inside. It should have been comforting to tell myself someone was just warming up their engine, but the truck didn't move, didn't inch forward, didn't even flick on a light to acknowledge my presence. I tried to ignore it, went inside, locked the door, and shut every curtain like sealing up a weak spot. I made late-night leftovers and tried to distract myself with a TV show, pretending everything was fine. But my mind kept drifting back to that truck sitting silently beyond the trees. Then came the knocks. 3 slow, steady knocks on the front door, like someone certain I was home. My body reacted before my mind did. I froze, mid-step, listening for a voice, footsteps, anything. "Eric?" I whispered, even though it didn't feel like him. "Did you come early?" Nothing. I forced myself to look through the peephole. No one was there. Just the dim porch light flickering over a fresh trail of boot prints leading toward the lake behind the house. Not toward a car, not toward a road, toward the frozen lake. My chest tightened. I backed away from the door, every instinct screaming that looking longer was a bad idea. Hours passed with me trying to distract myself. I told myself the knocks were a prank, or maybe someone lost in the storm. I tried not to stare at the curtains, afraid I'd catch the shape of someone on the other side. But when I went to refill my drink in the kitchen, my breath caught. Outside the cabin, illuminated by the porch lights, footprints circled the entire house. A perfect ring. Someone had walked a full loop around the cabin slowly, deliberately, stopping at every window. My hands shook as I called Eric. "There's someone out here," I whispered. "They knocked and then walked around the whole house." "I'm leaving right now," he said. "Stay inside. Check every lock. I'll be there in 40 minutes. I hung up and did exactly what he said. Every lock, every curtain, every switch. My fingers wouldn't stop trembling. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife we owned. It felt ridiculous at first, but less ridiculous as the anxiety crawled higher in my throat. Time dragged. The house popped and groaned from the cold. Then, just when I felt like I might be losing it, the motion light behind the house clicked on. The sound was soft, but ice shot through my spine. I moved toward the back window, every step harder than the last. The glass was so frosted I barely saw anything at first. I wiped a circle with my sleeve. A man stood inches from the window. Not in the yard, not halfway down the porch. Right there, staring at me through the glass. His hood was up. His breath fogged the window as he leaned closer, almost pressing his face to it. Then he lifted one hand and traced the outline of my cheek through the frost, following where my face hovered on the other side. He smiled. A small, knowing smile that said he'd been here long enough to learn something about me. I stumbled backward and screamed. He hit the glass once with his palm, hard enough to rattle the frame. His voice scraped through the cold. "Rebecca, I know you're alone." Every instinct in my body kicked in. Fight or flight became pure flight. I ran through the hall, down the steps, into the garage, hit the door button, and slid into my car, locked it, curled up in the back seat. Knife still in my hand, phone in the other. I whispered the address to the 911 operator, barely forming words. The operator's voice was steady, telling me to stay on the line, stay hidden, avoid making noise. But over the phone I heard something else. A dragging sound outside the garage, metal scraping against the wall, slow, searching. He was dragging something. An axe, a tool. I didn't want to imagine which. Minutes felt like an hour. I kept trying to shrink deeper into the seat. Then, at last, the sound I'd been praying for. Sirens. Red and blue lights cut through the cracks in the garage door. Doors slammed. Voices shouted. By the time police opened the garage, the scraping sound had stopped. All that remained were my muffled sobs and the crackle of the garage door motor as officers forced it open. They swept the property. Found the pickup truck still rumbling at the edge of the lake. Empty. Found axe marks carved into the sliding back door. Found footprints leading everywhere except toward escape. But they didn't find him. When Eric arrived, he held me like I might disappear. He didn't ask questions. He didn't tell me to calm down. He just drove me away from the cabin without looking back. We listed the place for sale the next week. I thought the nightmare ended there, that I left the danger behind with the trees and the snow. But a few days later, one of the responding officers called. His voice was careful. Too careful. "I didn't want to scare you that night," he said, "but there were 2 sets of footprints." "What do you mean?" My stomach twisted. "The man you saw made the deeper set, but there was another pair, smaller, lighter. Someone following him, tracking him, watching him from the tree line. They never approached the house. Then where did they go?" "That's the thing," he said quietly. "Their prints don't lead back into the woods. They just stop. Near the cabin." I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. Someone else had been out there. Someone who didn't knock, didn't circle the house, didn't smile at me through the glass. Someone who simply watched. The cabin sold fast, too fast. I never went back to pack my things. Eric did it for me. To this day, I don't know if he checked every room, every closet, every crawl space as thoroughly as he claimed. I never asked. Some nights, even in my new place miles away, I wake up sweating, convinced I heard footsteps on the patio. Sometimes, in the early morning cold, frost creeps across the window in a way that reminds me of a face forming behind it. I keep the curtains closed now, not because I'm afraid of what I'll see outside, but because I'm afraid of what might be standing on the inside instead. The man who traced my face through the glass still haunts me, but the one who never knocked is the one I fear the most. Because one of them left tracks behind, and one of them didn't. When your instincts scream that something is wrong, listen. Fear isn't always imagined. Sometimes it's the only warning you get. Ignoring it might cost you far more than peace of mind. I never believed moving to Vermont would change anything. People kept telling us a fresh start was what we needed, that the quiet might soften the sharp edges between me and Douglas. But silence can magnify things just as easily. Regret, distance, whatever hangs unsaid between 2 people who used to love each other more easily. We rented a small cabin at the end of a gravel road in Red Fern Hollow. The ad called it rustic. What it really meant was old wiring, cold floors, and an eerie kind of stillness that wasn't peaceful so much as hollow. But Douglas saw potential. He always does. He's a photographer and likes to believe wild places can fix broken things. I tried to believe it too. After the miscarriage, after months of me working paramedic shifts that chewed me up, after nights of quietly shutting down instead of talking. Maybe distance from Boston was the only thing left to try. The cabin backed up against dense pine forest. Locals mentioned the previous owner, some radio engineer who vanished years ago. I didn't think much of it until the first night when Douglas and I lay awake listening to a faint clicking inside the walls. He blamed old pipes. I blamed animals. We didn't argue about it. We were too tired to argue about anything. But the days brought stranger things. Fox tracks appeared near the porch every morning, deep, clear prints in the snow, but they never trailed away. It was as if something walked up to the cabin and either vanished or turned around in its own footprints. Once, I swore I heard humming near the bathroom window while I was showering, an old tune I couldn't place. I told myself it was the wind. I didn't tell Douglas. We had enough ghosts between us already. On the fifth night, a storm knocked out the power across the valley. We sat by the wood stove wrapped in blankets, trying to have a real conversation for once. I don't remember how it started, but he apologized, finally, for shutting me out after the miscarriage. I cried harder than I meant to. The storm howled outside, but for the first time in months, we weren't strangers. Then a burst of static cracked through the night, loud enough to rattle the windows. It came from the backyard. Douglas grabbed a flashlight before I could stop him. The cold slapped us the second he opened the back door. Snow came down in sheets, but the beam of his flashlight landed on something sitting in the center of the yard, a wooden radio, the kind you'd see in a thrift shop or an attic. It shouldn't have been there. It hadn't been there an hour earlier. It glowed faintly, even though nothing should have been able to power it. "Don't touch it," I said. He touched it anyway. The moment he brushed snow off the top, a warped old children's song blared out, slow, distorted, almost inhuman. I recognized the melody, but not the voice. Hearing that voice in the middle of a storm made something deep in my chest seize up. Douglas tried to shut it off. When his fingers grazed the dial, the song cut out, replaced by a whisper so close and so clear I felt it in the base of my spine. "Douglas, you left the door open." The back gate swung wide behind him. We hadn't touched it since moving in. 3 figures stood just beyond it, half hidden by the trees. They weren't bundled for the cold. Their shapes were too tall, their stillness too deliberate, their faces lost in shadow. "Get inside," I whispered. Douglas backed up quickly, nearly falling. We slammed the door, shoved a table against it, and I called the sheriff. The dispatcher asked if it could have been hikers. Hikers don't stand motionless in blizzards. Hikers don't know your name. When Sheriff Melvin arrived, the figures were gone. Only the radio remained, silent now, and cold enough to frost the sheriff's gloves. He took it with him, claiming he'd put it into evidence. He didn't look convinced by his own words. After he left, Douglas confessed something he should have told me days earlier. He'd been seeing footprints around the cabin each morning, circling it in full loops, but he didn't want to worry me. I told him I'd been hearing humming while showering. We stared at each other, both realizing we'd chosen silence over honesty again. The storm passed, but the air around the cabin felt different, denser somehow, as if the forest itself was listening. Every night at 11:47, we heard tapping on the walls. Always 3 taps, a pause, then 3 more. Sheriff Melvin never returned the radio and never followed up. Douglas thought we should leave, but the road stayed iced over for days. The power flickered every night, and I started waking from dreams about the radio humming inside the walls. On the 10th night without power, Douglas went outside to bring in more firewood. He was gone longer than he should have been. When I cracked open the door to check on him, I found him standing at the edge of the yard, staring toward the tree line. One of the figures was there, closer this time. I couldn't see its face, but I could tell it wasn't looking at me. It was looking directly at Douglas, head tilted like an animal studying prey. I grabbed his coat and yanked him backward. We didn't talk. We just went inside and locked everything. That night, the tapping on the walls came from multiple sides at once. The next morning, I told Douglas we needed to leave, even if it meant abandoning the car halfway down the road. But when we opened the door, the car was already there, closer to the house than we'd left it, idling quietly with frost melting on the hood. Keys in the ignition. Neither of us had touched them. Douglas swore he didn't move it. I believed him. That afternoon, we packed our bags. It didn't take long. We'd brought barely anything. Just before sunset, I heard the clicking inside the walls again, the same sound from our first night. It grew louder, like something was moving through the cabin itself. The lights flickered once, twice, then cut out. A soft hum rose from the living room. When I stepped in, every hair on my body stood up. The old radio sat on the coffee table, glowing faintly. It shouldn't have been there. The sheriff had taken it. Douglas grabbed my arm. "Claire, don't!" But the radio was already turning its own dial. Static erupted, sharp and violent, then settled into a clear whisper. "Douglas, Claire, open the door." The knocking started immediately. Not tapping, knocking. Slow, patient, confident. The urge to run fought with the knowledge that opening that door would be the last thing we ever did. I don't know how I knew that. I just did. Douglas grabbed the radio and hurled it into the stove. The flames swallowed it whole, the wood crackling around it. For a second, the cabin filled with a deep, metallic groan, something too low and too cold to be human. Then, the knocking stopped. We didn't sleep that night. We left before sunrise, driving through half-plowed roads until we reached town. We found a motel and stayed there for 3 days before going back to Boston. We never returned to Red Fern Hollow. Sheriff Melvin called once to ask if we'd taken back the radio. I told him no. He muttered something about finding his evidence locker open, then hung up. I think something in that valley listens, and once it hears you, it doesn't forget. I still hear tapping some nights. Always 3 taps. A pause. Then 3 more. The moral I carry from all of it is simple. When something feels wrong, speak up. Ignoring the signs, ignoring each other, nearly destroyed us long before anything supernatural did. Silence can be more dangerous than any voice whispering through the dark. I don't know why I agreed to spend that December weekend alone in Wolf Pine Ridge. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't still afraid of my aunt's old house, or maybe I just needed somewhere quiet to work before finals. Whatever the reason, the moment I pulled into the long driveway and saw the place sitting under a layer of fresh snow, I felt the same uneasy tug I'd felt since childhood. The house wasn't haunted, not in the storybook sense. It was just old, built back in 1898, and the kind of place where the floorboards talk more than people do. My aunt always kept it warm and cheerful, but she left for the city the same evening I arrived, promising she would only be gone 2 nights. I told her I'd be fine. I believed that for about an hour. What I remembered most was the attic. When I was 9, I'd gotten locked up there during a family gathering. I don't know how the door shut behind me, but I remember pounding and crying until my throat hurt. I also remember hearing someone whisper my name from behind the old trunks. Everyone told me it was just fear and imagination. I tried to believe them. That Friday night, a storm warning blared across my phone. Temperatures had already dropped below 0, and the wind shoved against the house like it wanted in. I set up my camera gear anyway. Photography is the only thing that cuts through my anxiety, and put on some quiet music to fill the silence. But the house seemed to swallow the sound. It felt like whatever lived in the walls was absorbing every note. Around 11 p.m., while adjusting the exposure on my camera, I heard something above me, a dragging sound, long, slow, like someone pulling a desk across the attic floor. I froze, listening. The house made noise sometimes. Old beams, old pipes, all that. But this sound had weight and direction. A deliberate scrape, a pause, another scrape. I tried to rationalize it. Animals, temperature shift, the wind. But a few minutes later, a whisper drifted through the vents. Thin, breathy, strangely stretched, like someone speaking from far away. I found something. My stomach dropped. Only my family ever called me Eli, and only when I was younger. Hearing it coming from above me, soft, slow, made my whole body tighten. I turned off the music. The silence afterward felt too loud. Then came the tapping. 3 taps. A pause. 3 more. Moving across the ceiling until it was directly above my head. Every instinct told me not to go investigate. But fear does weird things. You either freeze or chase the source. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the hallway. Dust coated the wooden floor, little puffs rising with every step. When I reached the attic ladder, I noticed the dust wasn't undisturbed. Footprints, bare, small, human, walked from the attic door to the wall and simply ended. No return prints, just a trail that stopped like someone had walked straight into solid wood. Before I could make sense of it, the attic door cracked open. Cold air spilled out, carrying a faint metallic smell. The flashlight shook in my hand. I whispered, "Hello?" immediately regretting it. A voice answered from the dark. "Come up. I need help." Not a scream, not a moan, just a quiet male voice strained through something broken. There was a second tone underneath it, like a second person whispering the same words a half-second behind. I stepped back, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The attic ladder suddenly swung down with a violent snap, hitting the floor with a crash so loud I jumped. I backed away, but then I heard footsteps on the attic floorboards, moving toward the opening. That was all I needed. I ran. Halfway down the stairs, the power shut off. The house fell into total darkness except for moonlight leaking through frosted windows. My breath fogged in front of me. I turned to bolt toward the kitchen, but a shadow, tall, narrow, stood at the top of the stairs. It tilted its head slowly, as if studying me. Then it sprinted down. I jumped the last 3 steps and ran into the basement, slamming the door and locking it. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone as I dialed 911. The operator told me to stay calm, stay on the line, but her voice sounded far away, like she was talking through water. Something hit the basement door, hard. Then again, harder. The wood groaned. A low voice rasped through the crack between the door and frame. "You can't hide in the dark, Eli." The way it said my name made the world tilt. I grabbed the toolbox off the workbench, more for comfort than defense. I forced myself to breathe. Then, glass shattered behind me. The small basement window blew inward, shards spraying across the shelves. A hand, pale, thin, filthy, reached through the broken window, feeling blindly for me. Its nails were cracked and yellow. Its skin looked frostbitten. I didn't think. I swung the toolbox with everything I had. The hand jerked back with a guttural growl, deeper than anything I'd ever heard from a human throat. I crawled through the opposite cellar window, ripping my jacket on the frame, and fell into the snow outside. The wind stung my face, blowing so hard I had to keep my head down just to breathe. Then headlights cut through the storm. A police cruiser. 2 officers rushed toward me, shouting questions I couldn't process. They pulled me into the back seat and cranked the heat while backup approached the house with flashlights drawn. I watched from the window, shivering so violently my teeth clicked. After several minutes, officers emerged dragging a man between them. He looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in months. Thin, dirty winter clothes, tangled hair, hollow eyes. He didn't fight or speak. He just stared straight ahead like he was sleepwalking. One officer muttered, "Found him in the attic, probably living there for weeks." That alone should have made sense. But nothing about the night had made sense since the first whisper. The footprints in the dust upstairs were too small to belong to the man they found. The voice I heard was nothing like his, and the strength of the thing that had slammed against the basement door didn't match his gaunt frame. As they pushed him into the cruiser, he lifted his head slowly. His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. His lips barely moved, but the words carried across the snowy driveway as clear as if he were whispering in my ear. "I wasn't talking to you," he said. "I was talking to the one still inside." Cold punched straight through me. The officers didn't react. They didn't hear him, or didn't believe him. Either way, they drove off with him, leaving the house eerily silent beneath the storm. They searched the house 3 more times. They found evidence someone had been squatting there. Food wrappers, blankets, the usual. But nothing explained the voice calling my name from the attic. Nothing explained the dragging sound. Nothing explained the footprints that ended at the wall. They assured me the house was empty, but I couldn't walk back inside. Something in me refused. I left with the officers and stayed in town until my aunt returned. I didn't tell her everything, just that someone had been living in the attic. She already felt guilty for leaving me alone. She doesn't need the rest, but winter nights haven't felt the same since. Whenever the temperature drops or the house settles, I hear echoes of those taps on the ceiling. Slow, deliberate, 3 in a row. People say fear fades over time. Maybe for them. For me, fear becomes memory, and memory has a way of climbing out of the attic when the world gets too quiet. What I learned is simple. When something deep inside you says, leave, listen. Your instincts know when danger has already found you, and ignoring them only brings it closer. I never used to fear the woods. Growing up in Maine, I spent half my childhood hiking and camping, convinced the forest was something predictable, a place where every sound came from something you could name. Joining the Coast Guard only deepened that belief. Nature was harsh, yes, but it wasn't malicious. It didn't hunt you. It didn't think. I stopped believing that the night I followed a stranger's footprints into the Thoroskaugur forest. My name is Nicholas Hale, and I've been a police officer in the Reykjavik district for 5 years. Before that, I spent 6 years in the Coast Guard. The job here is usually calm. Tourists getting stuck in snowdrifts, missing campers who almost always turn up. But a year before this incident, a hiker named Daniel Scott vanished on one of my patrol nights. We searched for days until the storm swallowed the tracks and the case went cold. That failure stayed with me. I still see the empty trail sometimes when I close my eyes. So when dispatch radioed at 1:18 a.m. on January 3rd and said, "Nick, we just received a voicemail from an unknown number, someone whispering for help," something in me locked into place. That tone in their voice, the one that meant something was wrong, pulled me upright in my seat. They played the audio as I drove. At first it was wind, then hurried footsteps crunching through snow, then a strained whisper. "Someone's following me. Please, please, hurry." A panicked inhale, then another set of footsteps. Heavier, slower. The recording cut off suddenly, not because the caller ended it, but because something ended it for him. I reached the location 12 minutes later. The road was one of the loneliest in the district. A narrow, icy route through dense evergreens, far from any homes or cabins. A silver SUV sat half buried in snow on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly. The driver's door hung open. A shattered phone screen glowed on the front seat. The voicemail app was still running. Whoever called had intended to keep the line open until help arrived, and they never made it back to the vehicle. 2 sets of footprints led away from the car. One small, frantic, weaving. The other larger, spaced farther apart, steady. Someone was running. Someone else wasn't. I radioed dispatch. They tried to send backup, but the storm rolling over the mountains was slowing everything down. "ETA 27 minutes, they said. Almost half an hour alone in a forest that made even my breath sound loud. I followed the prints with my flashlight, cutting through the dark. The deeper I went, the more the temperature dropped. The air felt thick, like it was waiting for something. After 10 minutes, the smaller footprints ended abruptly in a clearing. Not faded, not partial, just gone, like the ground swallowed them. But the larger prints continued. In the snow near the vanished tracks, something metallic caught my beam. A necklace, silver chain. The name, Alex Carter, engraved on a small plate. I pocketed it and continued. 5 minutes later, I started hearing it. Breathing that wasn't mine. Not fast or panicked moaned, but slow and deep, almost deliberate. I swept my flashlight between the trees, calling out, "Alex, if you can hear me, please answer." A whisper came from the dark. "Go back." I froze so hard my joints locked. The voice wasn't loud, but it was close. Too close. My radio crackled with distortion like someone dragging metal across a wire. Then a scream tore through the trees. Human. Raw. I ran toward it. The forest blurred past me. Branches scraped my face. Snow filled my boots. Cold sliced my lungs. The scream cut off suddenly. When I reached the next clearing, the track stopped again. Just ended. The ground around them was undisturbed except for a single object half buried in snow. A phone. The lock screen flickered weakly. My breath fogged the glass, and in that reflection, something stood behind me. Tall, still, wrong. I turned so fast I slipped on the ice. Nothing was there. No prints, no shadow. Just the thick dark between the trees. I picked up the phone, Alex's, and kept going. My radio barely held a signal, but I tried anyway. "Dispatch, I think the victim is still alive. I heard screaming. Continuing search." Static swallowed most of the response. I didn't get far before I heard footsteps again, circling me. Slow, intentional. My flashlight swept uselessly across tree trunks and snow. Then the voice returned, whispering my name this time. "Nick." I brought my gun up, backing toward a cluster of pines. "Who's there?" My voice sounded too small in that enormous dark. A branch snapped to my left. I turned, another to my right. Something was moving around me, fast and silent, like it was testing how close it could get without touching me. Then came another scream. Not far. I sprinted toward it. I found him slumped against a tree. Thin jacket, blue lips, frost clinging to his eyebrows. His whole body trembled, and his breath came out in painful bursts. "Help," he whispered. "Alex?" I knelt beside him and checked his pulse. Weak, but alive. "You're okay. I've got you." "They took him," he rasped. "Who?" I asked. "Not who." His shaking hand pointed behind me. A heavy crack echoed through the woods, like something large shifting its weight. I stood slowly, flashlight sweeping across the clearing. The moment I stepped away from Alex, the forest felt colder, like something inhaled. Branches shifted. Snow fell from a pine ahead. Something stepped between two trunks. Tall, too tall for the average man. Shoulders sloping in a way that made my stomach twist. My beam caught its shape for only a moment, but that moment was enough. Its limbs seemed to bend wrong. Its skin reflected the light like frost. And its eyes, those were the worst. They glittered like an animal's. I aimed the flashlight directly at it. "Stay where you are," I said, though I didn't believe it would listen. It tilted its head slowly, studying me like I was the one out of place. In the distance, faint sirens finally cut through the storm. The figure snapped its head toward the sound, then melted back between the trees. One moment it was there. The next, the forest swallowed it completely. I hauled Alex up, dragging him toward the old logging path I knew backup vehicles could reach. He could barely stand, but he clung to my jacket. "Don't let it take me," he whispered. "Nothing's taking you," I said, though my voice shook. When backup arrived, Alex was slipping in and out of consciousness. Paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, hooking him up to warm IV fluids. I stood outside, staring into the blackness between the trees. replaying the moment those eyes reflected my light. My chief asked what happened. I told him exactly what I saw. He asked if exhaustion or the storm distorted my vision, but when Alex woke up later that day, he confirmed everything. The footsteps, the voice, the height, the way it moved. Whatever followed him wasn't human. He said he heard it behind him for miles, said it stayed just far enough away that he never saw it fully, but close enough he could feel it watching. Then it chased him. At one point he said it even spoke. Not words, just sounds that felt like a warning. He told them he believed it hunts in storms. He told them it whispered my name too. No one filed a report calling it a creature. No official document referenced anything supernatural. The department labeled it a traumatic hallucination in extreme cold, both for Alex and, politely, implied for me. Cases like that get buried fast. Iceland has stories, sure, folklore older than the language, but none of us signed up to file police reports based on myths. Still, something was out there. Something that didn't leave tracks in straight lines. Something that moved faster than any human could in waist-deep snow. Something that didn't need light to see. Sometimes, on quiet shifts, I find myself back on that same road. I'll roll my window halfway down, listening to the wind drag across the pines. The forest never looks welcoming anymore. The shadows feel thicker, heavier, like they're holding their breath. Every so often, I swear I hear footsteps just outside the cruiser's lights, slow, steady, matching my breathing. I'll shine my flashlight out the window, but there's never anything there. Part of me hopes I imagined it all. The other part knows I didn't, because the woods never went back to normal after that night. The trees feel like they lean closer than they used to. The trail where Alex disappeared stays unnaturally quiet, even during the day. And every winter storm since then has brought reports of echoing footsteps or strange calls picked up by hikers' phones. Nothing ever concrete, but something. I've stopped telling myself nature isn't malicious. Sometimes the world holds things older than our explanations. Things that wait for the dark, for the cold, for the moment someone wanders just a little too far from the road. I still patrol that stretch, but I never walk into the forest alone anymore. Not after hearing my own name whispered by something I couldn't see, and certainly not after realizing it might still be waiting. Trust your instincts. Fear isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's the only warning you get before the world shows a side you aren't ready to understand.